Hello, everybody, and welcome to the LeanTossup NCAA football podcast. This is our fourth series for this year, previewing all of the conferences for this year's action. Today, we're going to talk about we hit on a couple of ACC teams. We're going to talk about the rest of the ACC, and we're going to finish off the Big Ten. We talked about the Big Ten West last time. We're going to focus on the Big Ten East this time. Of course, I'm joined as always by my co-host Buck Metrics. How are you doing this week? How are you enjoying this week in the middle of August?
Yeah, as is the case, middle of August means that kind of like every night is the night before Christmas. So it's that time when palms are itchy and sweaty, and we can't wait for the season to start. So really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we have there's very little there's very few days left without football basically. I mean, we have NFL preseason, which is fine. It's football. It scratches that itch a little bit. But yeah, college football really soon. We've got there's actually quite a few there's like about 6 or so games on not not this Saturday, not next Saturday, but the Saturday after that. That's when we get Nebraska Northwestern. We'll talk more about those in the future, but yeah, we are very close to beginning to a college football season, and then obviously there's a couple week games that week, but then the main course is the week after. Week 0 is coming up, and then obviously the big one is week 1. So let's get started on the podcast this week and go through this. So first of all, let's talk about Miami. So Miami University, the Hurricanes. So this is an interesting team this year, right? So obviously they kind of fired their guy. It was Manny Diaz. I remember he was their head coach last year. They fired him, which was somewhat of a surprise. He was okay, but not great as a head coach. So they replaced him with Mario Cristobal. We talked a little bit about this before on this podcast. They replaced him. Obviously, he was the head coach of Oregon. They hired him away. And again, they're basically their plan here is to use NIL money, and they're trying to they in the new NIL era they want a better coach. So they got rid of their old guy, bringing in Mario Cristobal from Florida, from Oregon to Miami, and now they've also they actually kind of found a really good quarterback. So I can't remember who it was. Who was their quarterback last year? It was Tyler Van Dyke, but didn't they have someone who was supposed to be their quarterback before, and then
Yeah, I think it was Derek King, right?
yes, Derek King, or yeah, Derek King, I believe. Something King. I can't remember. I think it was Derek King. Yeah. So he was supposed to be the quarterback for, or oh yeah, it's like Dare. Yeah, D apostrophe
Yeah, yeah,
Eric. Yeah.
yeah. How do you pronounce or not pronounce the apostrophe is where we get stuck there.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll call it Derek King. But yeah, he was supposed to be a good quarterback, and he was good in that COVID year for Miami. But then he got injured, and then people thought Miami's season was over. Well, not so much, because then they got Tyler Van Dyke. He took a step up, and he actually showed some promise at times last year. And again, I had Manny Diaz being fired as the head coach of Miami was a bit of surprising to me. I didn't think that was going to happen. But now we've got Mario Cristobal, and he's brought in and some other members on his um, team. He's brought in some other members, some other coaching staff. What are your thoughts on this one? Because this is a team that has somewhat hype on it. Actually, I remember looking at it today. Actually, I'll make this point because today was the AP poll was released, and we'll might talk about that a little later. But basically, looking at the poll, Miami. When you look at the rankings for Miami, Miami was ranked because if you go on if you look at the one page of it, which basically shows everybody who votes in the poll and how they rank their ballot, like it's an amazing visual, and it's so cool because Miami was ranked anywhere from 10th to 25th, and it was ranked always somewhere in there. Everybody ranked them somewhere, but that's just a massive variance, whereas anywhere from like 10th to 25th. And that shows, I mean, basically that's kind of what we're saying here in the fact that there is a lot of potential variance on this team. Some people think they're because they got a good coach now and they have Tyler Van Dyke, they're going to be a good team. Some people are saying, okay, well, it's still Miami. There's still some structural problems here. It's going to take them a couple of years to build this up. They could be a good team, but maybe not take on the Clemsons, maybe not take on the Wake Forest of the ACC. What are your thoughts on this? Where do you kind of put them?
Yeah, what's interesting about Miami is I think that they epitomize a lot about my feelings of really the top 25 outside the top three. And it's interesting that when I look at the top 25, and we'll get to that in more detail later, I see I think 5 ACC teams, which is pretty interesting. And we'll circle back to that in a moment here. So, and just one more thing on, I think they are the third rated ACC team in the top 25. So just kind of keep a mental note of that for now. So, what I like about Miami in 2022, they've got probably one of the best coaching staffs in America. And I got into this with some people on Twitter when I used my words deliberately. I said that Miami has a better coaching staff than Clemson. And when we talked about Clemson, I kind of tore them apart. And the more I even dug in, it's just the difference in coaching staffs is so huge. Miami, if you just go up and down their roster of coaches, just it's great. They got Josh Gaddis from Michigan. He was the 2021 Broyles Award winner as a top assistant coach for the miracles that he worked at Michigan and doing so under Jim Harbaugh. So that should get like extra consideration. Alex Mirabal is the offensive line coach, and he's pretty clearly one of the best in the country. Just a couple like other assistants just on offense. You know, the quarterback coach has been an OC at Appalachian State, so he's actually had greater responsibility at a lower program that knows how to win. I love that. That's somebody that knows exactly what a winning OC needs out of his quarterback coach. The running backs coach, he's young, so he's probably going to be a better recruiter. I think he actually was like one of the best players ever at FAU, if I remember correctly. Um, he was at FAU and Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. So he's proven, those teams both had really, really strong running games. So I like the coaching staff. And then if you talk to any Oregon, if anybody from Oregon is listening to this, they're probably screaming saying, "Yeah, but Mario." And yeah, I know there's Mario and the stupid things that he does in games that will inevitably cost them a game or two. Um, so I know it's going to happen. It will happen um, in each and every year. The thing I really want to see is he going to let Josh Gaddis, really be Josh Gaddis when it comes to running the offense? Um, if you look at Justin Herbert's statistics at Oregon and just basically how okay he was versus the Justin Herbert in the NFL, not really an NFL guy, but it's a night and day difference. And a lot of that was because Mario just kind of wanted to play gorilla ball and sit on the football for 4 quarters and not really run a offense that was very good at running the ball, but still wasn't awesome for his quarterback. That's kind of a tough trick to do. But he managed to do that. So, we'll see how much this great staff, and I mean it's really, really good, how much they'll help in year one. Um, Gaddis actually he gets what I have as a top quarterback in the ACC, which is really, really impressive because the thing about Miami for years has been that they don't really have anybody at wideout that scares you, and that's been a problem for a long time there, which is really surprising. But it speaks to how they just haven't recruited as well as they need to in their own backyard. Um, they have a very experienced O line that definitely should improve under Cristobal. He's a former O line coach. He played, I think, he's center for Miami, and Mirabal, like I said, a great offensive line coach. So I think there's going to be some improvement on offense. I just don't know if that's going to translate to better numbers for Van Dyke. It's going to just depend on how much Gaddis is allowed to be Josh Gaddis. The defense was a pretty good fifth in the ACC. The defensive staff is also good. So they should be better. The thing that I really like about Miami this year is they've got this really just a nice little cushion in their schedule here. So their last 2 games of the season are at Clemson and versus Pitt, which are going to be pivotal games in the division and in the conference. So, or yeah, Clemson in the other division, but um, before that, this is who they play. They're at Virginia Tech with the first year coach. They host Duke, bad in the first year coach. At Virginia, rebuilding under a first year coach. They host Florida State, which is a rivalry game, but Florida State is nowhere close to where they need to be or have been. And then they're at Georgia Tech, which might be the easiest conference road game that anybody in the ACC has this year. So they've got this crazy 5-game stretch where they can really, really find themselves, which is great under a first-year staff before they have those really 2 big games at the end of the year. So I like them, but I've got some serious questions about them at the same time as to what their ceiling is. It's interesting that Circus Sports has them at plus 475 to win the ACC, which is second in the ACC behind Clemson. And I've made pretty clear my feelings on Clemson. And Phil Steele actually has them winning the division. So I look at this and I think, as much as anything, if this is a team that's really the second favorite in the preseason to win the ACC, I like their long-term future. I will always have questions until Mario kind of sheds the weird Mario costume that he wears during games. This really makes me think, you know, a team that's so, I don't know if I'd say flawed, but has as many questions as that is such, is held in such regard to have a chance to win the ACC. As much as anything, it really reaffirms what I've kind of said in earlier pods about going deeper and taking a stab at North Carolina and Louisville to win the ACC because everybody's got questions about them, and it's not like these are small questions. Everybody's got serious questions in this conference.
Yeah, and I think that is an important point on this too. One thing I will say, and as someone who's generally a fan, I like Oregon. I don't really have a horse in the Pac-12, so yeah, sure, I like Oregon. The thing of it is, there's always, like with Oregon, there's always been that game, and you can, as an Oregon fan, you could see it coming. Like last year, it was Stanford, and my model had it coming, and I'm like, okay, and the spread was like, it's always a game, and the spread sometimes is like suspiciously short. It was like Stanford plus 11, and you're like, oh no, and you're like, there's no way they could lose this game. There's no way. How could they lose to this team? And then they go ahead and they lose to that team, right? It's like either Stanford or Arizona State. It's always a team. It always is a game that they shouldn't lose. And honestly, right? Because like this Oregon team, we've seen them beat teams like in the COVID year, we saw them beat USC, and we've seen them consistently beat the top teams in the pack. We've seen them not have problems with Washington or Stanford. It's always like or USC. It's always like Stanford or it's always a team that is not particularly good that will always catch them. It'll always catch them, and then they'll be like. Oregon will always be like 20 some odd point favorite against a team, and then that's the team that they'll lose to. They'll win as the 3-point underdogs, except against Utah last year twice. But they'll win as underdogs. They'll like I've seen them go into like USC and win, but then they'll lose the game at home when they're 20 some odd point favorites, and then that's the problem.
They won at the Horseshoe. They beat Ohio State at
Yep,
Ohio State, and
yep, and
that's
then they
not
lose
something that
to
happens often. Then they lose to Stanford.
exactly
It's
right.
crazy.
And this is the thing. And the question is that the Oregon program, or is it Mario Cristobal, or is it the people he had around him? Right. Again, if we've got and the thing of it is, it's always that one game where their offense will just get really bogged down, and it will just things will not work for them. And to your point about Justin Herbert, it is an important piece in this too. Justin Herbert's been really good in the NFL, but at times it's always felt like he hasn't been fully unleashed. I mean, I remember, I'm not sure if you watched it. It was the last game of the regular season last year between the Chargers and the Raiders. The Sunday night game. It was the crazy game that if they tied, both of them would have made it to the playoffs. And that the Raiders took a big lead early, and that game was insane. It was literally like for two straight drives, the offense kept trying to do things, but just it kept having to go to fourth down. And every time Justin Herbert kept having to convert like fourth and 13, fourth and 8. And he just every time he just stepped up and did it. And it was crazy. That was such a like he's such a good player, and he can do these insanely high caliber things. But the problem is, I feel like a lot of the time the offensive scheme lets him down, and I feel like a lot of the times it's like, okay, well, let's just run 2 plays, and then okay, well, he can on 3rd and 8 he can throw it, and that was kind of, I feel like that's a little bit of what happened last year with the Chargers to an extent. It's kind of why they lost a couple of games that they shouldn't have lost, like they lost to the Texans. There's a couple of games that they dropped last year that had they won those games, they would have been easily into the playoffs, but they didn't. And that's also kind of the same thing with Oregon. And the question is, with Cristobal coming down Miami, will he do this? Like, here's the thing: I think you're saying that they get Clemson later. So like watch, like they'll like beat Clemson, but then they'll lose to Duke. Or like I'm trying to figure out what the ACC equivalent of Stanford or like a team is. I'm trying to figure out what the equivalent is, like Florida State or something. Oh no, it'll be Florida State. That's who it'll be. That I'm counting right now. That'll be like Mike Norvell's saving grace. It's gonna be Florida State. But watch, they'll lose like one of those random games, and then that will and that's been the story of Oregon these last couple of years, right? One of the reasons why the Pac-12 hasn't gone to the conference, like to the playoff, and people are like, oh, it's because the conference is people will say it's the craziest things. It's like, oh, it's because of recruiting or funding or no, it's all because Oregon just randomly drops a game to Stanford every once in a while, and like that's literally actually what it is. Because if it's an undefeated Oregon, they're getting into the conference playoffs, like they're getting into the CFP. It's
Yeah.
literally just because Oregon will drop a random game. So, but no, it's an interesting thing. We'll have to see if this team can actually make like if maybe Mario Cristobal needs to give up some offensive play calling duties and do some of that. We'll have to see. I'm intrigued by this team. This is a team that I'm gonna like. I'm probably gonna love this team at times as an underdog, but watch when they're like when this team starts getting expectations, like when they go into Duke as like 24 and a half point favorites. That's when you watch out. Watch out. That's when you start getting. If you're a Miami fan, start getting scared. Then you're like, oh no, you see it coming. Next up, Pitt, a team that for some reason is actually what are they ranked in the AP preseason poll today? Let me call that up here.
17th.
17th. Somehow they are ranked 17th. That's very generous considering they lost their quarterback and wide receiver. We talked about them. We've talked about them a little bit before on this podcast. Um, apparently, so this is another interesting thing that um is kind of really good to talk about when we're here. Um, basically, so and one of the things we've been talking about is like is when a quarterback leaves, if the quarterback's been good, is it the team that was good that made him a good quarterback, or was the quarterback good and that elevated the team? And this is a big question for this year specifically because people really view this as kind of a down quarterback year, a down quarterback class. Now, I personally, for the NFL draft at least, now for me personally, I kind of felt that the reason people thought this was a down quarterback class was because of last year's quarterback class, because everybody was super hype about Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Trey Lance and all of them, and then they generally underperformed. Like surprisingly enough, the best game for a quarterback in the NFL last year from a rookie was actually Davis Mills in the Houston Texans, where he threw for 3 touchdowns. That was actually the best game for a rookie quarterback last year, and that was for the Texans. And Davis Mills was a third-round draft pick. So they generally underperformed last year. So I was concerned that it might be an overreaction when people were like, "Oh, these quarterback class is horrible. We're not going to draft any of these guys." Well, I mean, I was watching some NFL preseason this week. Kenny Pickett was actually really good with Pittsburgh, and that with the Steelers, and that actually is a really bad sign for Pitt because if he's actually able to step up into an NFL role and be okay, that means he was carrying this team, and that means they are in trouble. So this is where I mean again, it's not definitive yet. It's one preseason game. Anybody can have a good preseason game. But again, these are kind of the things you start looking at and you're like, was he carrying this team last year? And currently at this point it's kind of seeming like that might be the case. So now they do get Kenton Slovis, who was the quarterback for USC. At one point I remember him being hyped as like to be honest, I don't remember. I didn't follow Heisman odds that frequently before, but I thought wasn't he kind of like an outside candidate for Heisman last year? I don't
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
Like
he
he was,
was like in that second group that would be like in like maybe 10 to 25 to 1.
yeah, exactly right, and that just did not happen at all. Um, I don't know. You're kind of a more you're definitely more of a USC guy. You've definitely seen a lot more Slovis play than I have. What are like? Do you think that he's going to be able to stabilize and have a good year, or do you think that um, or do you think that he was kind of a product of the USC system at the time, and he's that's not going to translate well to this system, especially under Pat Narduzzi, a coach that we have definitely ascribed to questionable coaching ability.
Yeah, I don't think it works. I don't even know if he was a product of the USC system as much as the hype that surrounds the USC system. You know, his first season as a true freshman, he had a QB plus of 136, which is really, really good. I mean, he deserved every award that he got that season. but in the next two seasons, he went down to a 90 and an 89, and people didn't realize just how much he had slipped. And I don't know, there were stories about it was his elbow and it was his footwork and it was this and that, but it just, he wasn't the same guy. Um, what's interesting about him is, as a 2-year starter, before last season, he wasn't even voted a team captain, which is it's not a great sign if your returning 2-year quarterback, 2-year starting quarterback isn't voted a team captain. There's just something wrong there, or off, or whatever you want to call it. But I don't think if you take a guy that's just kind of not been the same and you plug him into, if you look at the new offensive coordinator, that guy's resume is just exceedingly unspectacular. It's just such a whatever that I really understand why Jordan Addison left. I don't think you mentioned him. I think USC got the better of that transfer portal swing of slowness for Addison.
Imagine if that's like just a trade, like a dynasty trade proposed. Be
Yeah,
like, you get Kenton Slovis, we get your best wide receiver.
yeah. So, and then you throw in the fact that whatever I just not only is this OC just really not really super impressive. I'm just very suspicious of the fact that Narduzzi hired him, you know, when Narduzzi is probably at the most powerful he's been there in years and has more sway over that than he might otherwise have. So I don't really like what their offense is going to become, except for their offensive line is experienced and yet they have a really high improvement metric too. So I think we could see a lot of football on the offensive side of the ball that Pat Narduzzi loves, which is just a lot of running between the tackles and hit you hard and hold on to the ball. So I don't know what that means for Keaton Slovis, but it doesn't scream to me an offense that's going to be dynamic. Um, their offense was only sixth in the ACC last year, so it's not like Whipple got a lot of accolades, but it just to your point, I think it was a lot more probably Kenny Pickett and Jordan Addison than any magic that he did. It just that seems to fit the fact pattern more than Mark Whipple being some genius because he's basically proven that he's occasionally a good offensive coordinator, but not a turnaround guy. Um, on defense, they actually were third in the ACC, in a pretty good conference, especially for defenses. And actually, they're one of the top, in the country in returning talent metrics and improvement metrics. So, I mean, this could be just like watching, when Narduzzi was at Michigan State, a lot of those Mark D'Antonio teams, just a lot of running and a lot of ball control and a lot of hit you hard and a lot of probably the good news is they'll be like 3 hour games. They won't go to 3 hours and 45 minutes. I just, you know, the other thing too is they had, a game and a half of good luck last season. And it's just, if just how bound they are to do stupid things, it's hard to see them being on the good luck list. So I think if anybody's a candidate to really just fall out of that good luck strata with an absolute, on a tear, it would be them. They're actually third in the ACC to win the title per Circus Sports, which again, with so many question marks, it just like Miami even more so. You know, sign just that you're probably going to get value deeper because everybody's got question marks in this conference.
Yeah, and that we're gonna it's gonna be interesting to see how this team and we're gonna know right off the bat, right? West Virginia, it's the that's week 1, not week 0, but it's Pittsburgh -7. Actually, little bit of juice on that, so that line is actually already coming down a little bit towards West Virginia. It's 6.5 in a couple books. Um, and that's the test, right? And this is classic trap line, right? Be like, oh, Pittsburgh, they won the ACC last year. Of course they can. Of course they can cover 7. It's West Virginia. Yeah, watch. That's a trap line. We're gonna talk a lot about trap lines. So this is the thing. So we're that's going to be an interesting one to watch. We're going to talk about that obviously more when we get to it in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, we're going to know really fast, and also we're going to have 2 more Steelers preseason games. Pickett will probably play in at least one of them, could potentially, and again, we don't Trubisky didn't have the greatest of starts in this because he's competing with Mitch Trubisky for the starting position for Pittsburgh. Non-zero chance that uh, he could be named the starter for the Steelers week 1. And if he is named the starter for this, they just immediately start fading this team. Just alt unders, like all that's so. I mean, I'm partly joking, but like I'm like also not joking. Like maybe this could be pretty bad, so we'll have to see. NC State. So this is a team we've talked about a lot. This is a team that I think a lot of people are kind of saying this is their year. Again, I kind of feel like we're talking a lot about Oregon. I feel like this is kind of this was before Miami's come here now. This kind of like was the Oregon of the ACC, right? This is a team that would generally have pretty strong starts, and then the second they go up against they're kind of like actually opposite Oregon in that case. They usually clean up the competition, but the second they come up against someone good like Clemson or Florida State for years, suddenly they would lose, or they drop the ball against someone and lose, and that's the thing. So NC State, the question is, do they actually have the ability to pull this off this year? They hold a lot of their returning talent. How do you feel about this team this year?
Do they have the talent? Yeah. Do they have the DNA? No, because they didn't win their own division last year because that's what this program does. You know, they were the best in their division. They were actually the best team in the entire ACC by my metrics last year. So it's just, you know, that's just what they do. And until they prove differently, that's I think where they're headed. They actually had the fourth best offense and the second best defense in the ACC. I mean, in a conference with this many teams, that says a lot. That's not just balance. That's being actually legitimately good on both sides of the ball. So, um, I think that there, there's a lot of promise there, and Leary, he had a good season, but this is weird. The ACC is actually sneakily loaded, and this is one another reason I don't like Pitt because Slovis is really coming into a conference with a lot of quarterbacks. I actually have Leary as the fifth rated returning quarterback in the conference, which is surprising because he's legitimately good. But you've got, ahead of him, you got the quarterbacks at Louisville, at BC, he's back for a full season, Miami, Van Dyke, and Virginia, Armstrong. You know, of course, all those teams have question marks, like we've said, but it's not like they've got CJ Stroud in the Big Ten East just dominating over everybody else. So I don't know if they're in such a great position of strength as maybe some think from an offensive standpoint. I was surprised when I was, doing my research on these guys. Their defense, I had them 13th nationally, which kind of surprised me and kind of didn't. I knew they had a good defense, and they tend to send a lot of big guys into the pros. But 13th nationally, I didn't think they were that great. And then they actually have significant returning experience and career experience metrics as well. So I think they're going to be very tough to score on, but you know, I'm just I'm just worried about when push comes to shove, and to your point, when it's a prove it game. I don't know if it's going to be their prove it moment. They're going to be, again, I think, the most complete team in the ACC this year. They're fourth to win the ACC at plus 825 at Circa. Um, there might be a little bit of value there if you kind of made with this more of a blind resume and took it out of the Wolfpack uniform.
Yeah, and that's a good point on it too, right? Like, there's a lot of times if you're like, oh, here's a profile of a team, you're like, oh man, that team could win the conference this year, but yet they're plus 825 to win. And the thing of it is, though, we're talking about an ACC. We don't love Pitt. We definitely don't love Clemson. Definitely don't love Florida State. We definitely are iffy on Miami. I mean, here's the thing. Someone's got to win this conference. I don't know who it is, but one team will win this conference. And I don't know which team it's going to be, but a team will win. I am confident in my prediction that a team will win the ACC. I just don't know who it is, and I don't hate the ability to. I mean, grabbing an 825 isn't the worst, right? I mean, will you bet it and then feel stupid because it didn't win? Yeah, of course, because
Because
that's what
it's North
happens.
Carolina State. Yeah.
That's the thing, but like they're just a decent team, and maybe this is their year. And again, also, we're not talking about them here, but North Carolina again. Sam Howell called in for Washington. He played a bit for the Washington Commanders who drafted him. He looked really good, which is terrifying for this North Carolina team this year. Again, this is the inverse relationship here. Like
Hmm.
Malik Willis, he looked really good for Tennessee. So Liberty, so this is the thing, right? So like these guys actually look pretty good. Now again, it's preseason, but whatever. But like Sam Howell was actually kind of on fire. So yeah, not loving North Carolina this year. So we'll go from there. Florida State, the dumpster fire of the ACC. Um, I don't know what they're doing. Like I think they only kept Norvell because I feel like they've kept Norvell just out of necessity. They're like, we can't really get anybody better, so we may as well just stick with this guy. This has not been particularly good. They are vaguely improving, but it's not, it doesn't seem like it's getting worse. Again, there's different steps to this, right? Like you're not going to just start becoming more competitive and get to 8 wins. Like it's going to take you a while to build this back up, but it's Florida State. Like at a certain point you expect like good recruits. You have the fan base, you should have the money. It's really questionable as to why this team hasn't been able to perform yet. Now, maybe this year could be, um, maybe this year could be different for Florida State, but like I don't know. All I know is that usually the first thing I do every college football season is just week one I fade Florida State, and that usually that's paid off very well. And there's been a couple times that I've wanted to, but I didn't. And then I'm looking at the score, I'm like, oh, Florida State lost because like they'd be playing against a random team, and I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna fade them this week. But then they actually lose that game. I'm like, wow, I can't believe they lost that game. But it's yeah, it's an interesting like I don't know what's going to happen. This year could either be like okay and Florida State could get back to some respectability, or this is going to be really bad and Norvell's gone by Thanksgiving. This is actually insane because I was looking at FanDuel today for look ahead lines. Um, See if you can have if this line makes any sense to you. So okay, let me call this up here. So they have obviously a lot of they have future lines that people are intrigued with. That like obviously like future lines like um you could bet on like certain future games. Like obviously right now you could bet on Michigan, Ohio State, right? Like the big rivalry games. It's like right now Ohio State minus 13 and a half. Florida State, right? This is obviously the big rivalry game. This is the week they play this. They play this on Thanksgiving week again. Let me find it here. What do you think the spread in this game should be? Where would you put this Florida State spread?
Jesus, I mean, you've got new coach and kind of rebuild against a guy that's just spinning his wheels. It's at Florida State. I'm gonna say Florida probably by somewhere in the 5.5 to 6.5 range.
Florida State minus 2.
You're joking.
I'm dead serious. I could not believe it either. Florida State minus 2. I want this is on FanDuel by the way. I want to make it like half the reason I want to make a FanDuel account is to bet on this line like right now. Like I'm not even joking. This is insane. Florida State plus like Florida plus 2. How is that even possible?
Yeah, I don't see that, and I made a pretty strong case against Florida. I think it was, yeah, last pod.
Some of these are hilarious. You can get Baylor plus 4.5 against Texas. Uh, Auburn plus 24 at Alabama.
Is
That
this? Are you
seems
looking up basketball or something? Are we sure we're?
it's different school. No,
Yeah.
Penn State minus 6.5. Michigan State at Penn State. Penn State minus 6.5. I mean, they could like, couldn't they? James Franklin could be fired by then. Like I don't like some of these lines are hilarious. Like I don't even. Yeah, that one is the Florida State minus 2. I cannot believe that they're favored. Like the books are really out on Florida this year. Um, Yeah, some of these lines are hilarious, but this is one you don't want to touch. Wisconsin minus 3 at Nebraska. That's just like no, I will not touch that game.
Hmm.
Um, but no, so Miami at Florida, Miami Florida plus 7.5 at Clemson. That's not bad. That's actually pretty good.
Yeah, we just never know, you know,
Yeah.
which version of Mario we're gonna get.
Okay, and one more interesting one: Utah at Oregon. Utah plus 2.
Nah, that there's no way that'll hold up. There's just no way.
Like these are you should be betting. We should be betting this line right now.
Yeah.
Utah +2. Like that's crazy value. But anyways, okay, yeah, no, like I that's really questionable how that line is there. No idea how that is. Yeah, I'm gonna if I make a FanDuel account, I'm immediately betting that line. Wake Forest. This was a good team last year. They actually ended up in a bowl and then they crushed what was it, Rutgers? Because they had to find a replacement for the team they were gonna play, and then they just destroyed Rutgers. I mean this team has always been fun. It's been a decent team with Sam Hartman as QB, but it is flawed. It's the flaw in this team is called the defense. Um I I don't know. I do like this team. I just don't know if I like them to go all the way. Like this is again one where NC State could catch them, maybe Miami could beat them, right? Like I worry about this team defensively. Like sure, I know they can score points, but if the other teams are gonna be able, like if that defense is really shaky, I'm concerned about this team.
Yeah, as am I. I've loved Dave Clawson for a long time. Just admired him from afar. I guess he's not getting looks at bigger jobs, maybe because he just likes what he has here. He's got pretty low expectations, and I think he's probably just happy doing what he's doing, and maybe just doesn't want to rebuild again. I think, is nationally one of the most underrated coaches. Like you said, this team was led by its offense. They return every offensive lineman, and they're a experienced group. It's not just everybody coming back, but everybody's got some serious experience. And Sam Hartman comes back. Um, the thing is, there's no reason to expect their defense to improve. It's not like they had a bunch of young guys. I don't think actually they changed their defensive coordinator, but we're not sure what that's going to do. So I'm skeptical that they can be any better than last year. Now, if you say, okay, they went 10-2, then we have to factor in I had them with good luck of over 2.5 games, and K Ford actually has them regressing by 2.4 wins. So a couple data points saying that there's going to be a step back for Wake Forest. That makes me think that even if everything if they perform at the same rate as last year, it could be a challenge to still get to 8 wins. That's what the season total is. So that might be high. I'm not going to bet under, though. I'm never going to bet against Dave Clawson on a season long um, wager. Just not. I've got better things to do than try to make money at his expense.
Yeah, Wake Forest will be an interesting like spot team to have at different times, but I'm not looking for them in the futures market. All right, so do you want to talk about the AP poll and what you see from that? I've got a couple interesting notes, and then I'll kind of save one for when we talk about the rest of the Big Ten East. So, all right, just I'll read off the top 25, and then I'll let you talk about it then. So, one Alabama, obviously 54 first place votes, two Ohio State, six first place votes, three Georgia, three first place votes. One quick comment I do want to say about this is that with only a couple of exceptions, I just feel like the team that won the national championship should just automatically be ranked one next year until they lose. I feel like it's kind of a respect thing, but like how I really doubt basically anybody's ability to be able to evaluate a team that won the national championship is worse than like I mean obviously Georgia lost a couple of pieces, but it's hard to assess that Alabama has somehow gotten better than them and Ohio State have also gotten better than them when we have no data to prove that. I mean, Georgia could have gotten like unless they lost half their team, which they didn't. I find it's really weird that they could just stick them in third, but whatever. Fourth place is Clemson. Wow, that's really overrated. Five Notre Dame, six Texas A&M. Wow, okay. Seven Utah, eight Michigan, nine Oklahoma, 10 Baylor, 11 Oregon, 12 Oklahoma State, 13 NC State, 14 USC, 15 Michigan State, 16 Miami, 17 Pittsburgh, 18 Wisconsin, 19 Arkansas, 20 Kentucky, 21 Ole Miss. That's really high. Wake Forest, Cincinnati, Houston, and then 25 is BYU. So yeah, okay. Clemson really dropped out to me there. What's jumping out to you as well?
Yeah, this just kind of speaks to where the point I made when that coaches poll came out. First thing, before I get to that, you remember the coaches poll Texas had that one first place vote, and I kind of wondered if they had not gotten that vote at all, let alone a first place vote, if that would have let them, left them unranked. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that now they're unranked here. So the other
I
thing that's, oh, go
I'll
ahead.
say one thing on that though. So obviously, as works with law statistical averages, there because I'm looking at the grid here, there are a lot of AP writers that did rank Texas. Probably about half of them, but generally they were ranked lower. Like they were ranked around 20th or so. I'm seeing 116, but
Mm,
most of them are in the 20s, right? Same
wow.
thing is kind of, and also the other team that applies to is Penn State. About half of them ranked them, but they only ranked them about 20. So the non-ranks just kind of drop them out.
Hmm. Yeah, I forgot about Penn State. That was a good point that you had made on that. The other thing that sticks out to me is, and this is when I put it this way, there's something that really, really sticks out. The teams that I would be shocked if they're not ranked at the end of the season: one Alabama, two Ohio State, three Georgia, seven Utah, and then literally this is where it gets interesting because I can't put them really high, but there's one other team I would put in that class, and that's actually Cincinnati. I know they have a lot that to replace, but they have a lot on offense and they have a great coach and they don't have a crazy, crazy path. So it's interesting that they wind up at 23, but literally every other team, I would not be shocked if they were out of the top 25 at year end.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, right? Like go through this list and which teams would you be shocked if they weren't in the top 25? And yeah, like which ones would you not be shocked if they were in the top 25? And yeah, I would not be shocked if Clemson wasn't. Be a little surprised at Notre Dame. They've had a couple of years of excellence at this point. It'd be a real fall down for them. I'd be a little shocked, but and again, their name will kind of buoy them anyway. Texas A&M, yeah, I would not be shocked at that. Texas A&M, by the way, 7-point favorites against Florida. People really low on Florida this year, apparently. Utah, yeah, that one. Michigan, again, like Michigan could lose to Michigan State, could lose to Ohio State. They could be unranked. They could be a 3-loss Michigan team.
We
Definitely
will,
could be.
yeah, I've got a pretty interesting case about them coming up shortly.
Yeah. Then Oklahoma. Then yeah, Oklahoma. I would not be surprised if they weren't ranked. I like
Yeah.
if they're unranked. I wouldn't be surprised. Baylor.
Baylor, I
Eh,
might include on that list too.
Baylor might be one. That would be one that if they were
Yeah,
unranked, I'd be a little surprised. Oregon. I'd be a little surprised if they were unranked, but
no
I could
way,
see
no
it.
way.
I'd be a
Just
little surprised. A little
you just
surprised.
okay. I'll beef up my case against them next week.
Okay, that's fine. I'd be a little surprised if they unranked. Oklahoma State, that one wouldn't. If they were unranked, that wouldn't surprise me. It'd just be the end of an era. NC State, they can usually fall off. USC, I wouldn't. Well,
Yep,
it could go badly. It could go badly for them. Michigan
oh yeah,
State,
it's not like out of character. Believe me, it wouldn't be like totally off the script for them to be unranked.
yeah. Michigan State, yeah, a
Stay
little.
tuned. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Yeah, we're talking about them. Miami, I'd be a little shocked if Miami was unranked. Pittsburgh, no. Wisconsin, definitely not. Arkansas, I'd be a little shocked if Arkansas was unranked. Kentucky, Ole Miss, definitely not. Wake Forest, Cincinnati. I mean, Houston it's a dumb one to have, but like the thing is because they'll never actually like they will never get their true ranking because they're always like obviously teams like Cincinnati. That's one of the reasons why I won't. You said you'd be surprised if Cincinnati was unranked. If Cincinnati has like 2 losses, they're not on this list, right? And that's the problem, right? Because they're never actually truly ranked because these lists are biased against or biased for the Power Five, right? And biased against the Group of Five, right? So
Not necessarily because one of their game. I think they open at Arkansas, so they can lose that and one more and still be ranked. I think it depends how which are the two and how bad are they.
But like, okay, let's play out that hypothetical then. So okay, fine. Say they lose week one against Arkansas. Say they lose by like 20 or something. If they keep winning, they're re-ranked by what week 6?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. That's about
And
right.
yeah, they it looks like they miss Houston this year too.
That's actually pretty lucky. That could be the conference
Yeah.
championship game again. Actually, I think. All right, so that I think wraps up that. We'll save. I want to mention Penn State here because I I remember I called that last week. I'm like, oh, I wonder how many votes they did get. And then we talked about that. When we talked about the coaches poll. We'll talk about Penn State because we're now doing the Big Ten East. So we'll get to Penn State in just a little bit. But first, in up for the Big Ten East, we have Michigan. So again, this is a team we've actually talked a little bit about already. We had said that last time we asked the question. If Ohio State beats Michigan, where is Michigan ranked this year? We all said they'd be ranked in the teens. They're eighth. So they're about 10-ish spots higher, 9 or 10 spots higher than they would be if they had just lost the game. Um, I mean, obviously they had JJ. McNamara was actually decent out last year, but again, he wasn't amazing. Like this is a
Yeah.
quarterback who you could definitely pencil. Like it's definitely possible you can have regression there. I know they have another quarterback coming up, but it's questionable as to whether or not he's ready or not this year. I mean, again, before last year, we were talking about Harbaugh basically being run out of Michigan. People were talking about like literally like they wanted him gone. There was talk about like him bolting to an NFL team. There was still talk about him bolting to an NFL this team this year, right? And there's the reason for that. It's not because he's necessarily a bad coach. It's because he hasn't had much success at the college level. He was an NFL coach before, I think, and his brother obviously is the coach of the Baltimore Ravens, twin brother actually. So I could definitely see cases where like there is, but his job has been on shaky territory before. We'll say that before. This year, that last year saved his job, but how long did it save his job for? Right? I mean, this team was chronically underperforming until last year when they were able to beat Ohio State and get to the playoff. Right? That's it. That's the that's the only thing that saved them last year. And then by the grace of God, they got Iowa in the champion in the Big Ten championship game somehow. And well, not it wasn't even Iowa. It was Iowa running the offense 20 years ago. So this is the thing. I have a lot of questions about this team. Michigan's State, a team I've usually liked to fade. That didn't work last year. I didn't really fade them that much last year. There was they had value at times, but I don't know. I don't know if I can get behind this team this year. I this is a team that like I'm again like I'm gonna be like when they're 7 point favorite against Michigan State or again I'm not sure actually I don't have their schedule in front of me, but like depending on who they play this year, this is a team I can see myself betting against a lot. What about you on that?
Yeah, it's I'm not going to be looking for spots to bet on them. I see them more as a potential soft target than one that will strike at soft targets. Um, even though they won the conference, I had them second overall in the Big Ten, tied with Wisconsin. Um, McNamara, to your point, he was okay. I have him as the fifth best returning quarterback, so certainly nothing that screams like this is a team that can't be beat. And then, you mentioned JJ McCarthy. It's weird because everybody gets that McNamara seems to have a ceiling, and they lose Josh Gaddis to Miami, so who knows how the new offense is going to be. And I don't like when the buzz already is about the backup quarterback before the season starts. It just doesn't strike me as great for the upcoming season. What's interesting too is if you look at under Harbaugh since he got to Michigan, here's the QB plus ratings for his quarterback since he's gotten there. And again, 100 is basically just average in all of FBS. 105, 105, 113, 114, 98, 112. Nice, but that's really you need better quarterbacks than that in the Big Ten. And it's interesting that he seems to kind of have a limit to how good his quarterbacks could be. Even when their offense was good enough for Josh Gaddis to win the Broyles Award as the top assistant in the nation. Um, so I'm just really wondering what on earth's going to happen to their offense. Now they do have one of the better improvement metrics nationally for the offensive line. So maybe there's the running game helps, but we kind of saw that already last year. And it worked last year. Will it work again? I don't know. They have the sixth least experienced defense in all of FBS. They lost their defensive coordinator to the NFL. You're an NFL guy more than me. I know that I think their defensive ends. Did they both go in the first round?
Uh, I know.
I
Yeah, the other one
Hutchinson
got
did.
injured in he got injured at the pro day,
Yeah.
so he went. But he was going to be a first round pick. Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, I remember that now. Yeah, he's kind of fell off, but he's now a Baltimore Raven. They got him at a really good price. But yeah, no, they're. I mean, this is the thing. Hutchinson seems pretty good, and yeah, that's an interesting point about they have lost a lot of defense.
And they lost their defensive line coach, who obviously knows what he's doing. He actually is at USC now, which was a brilliant hire. Um, It seems like they got their playoff bid just because a lot of and the more we talk about this seems to be kind of a theme. I don't know if this is just how life is or if it was just a 2021 thing. It seems like they got a playoff bid just because like things fell into place and they just didn't kill themselves as much as other teams did. Just they let Ohio State just kind of just shoot themselves in the foot twice and picked up the pieces. Um, the other thing is there's going to be some regression aside from everything else in that they had 2 games of good luck last season, and K Ford shows them with almost a game and a half. So, a couple of data points there saying that just all other things equal, it's going to come back to the mean a little bit. What's in their favor is they have no road games until October. Um, all their games in September are at home, so that helps with all these question marks. The season win total is 9.5, which seems really really high to me. I don't think I'm gonna play it, just because there's a lot of kind of unknowns on their schedule. But man, if I just had $100 to spare and had been drinking, I could definitely see just somehow a Michigan under ticket winding up in my pocket.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna pull the trigger on that one. So as an interesting thing, 'cause you did remind me, like when you said that about everything kind of fell into place. I just quickly called up Michigan last year. So I'm just gonna run through their schedule here. So Western Michigan, they beat them 47-14. That's fine. They got Washington, which they beat 31-10. Again, a down year for Washington. Um, Northern Illinois, they beat them 63-10. Again, a MAC team, that's expected. They only beat Rutgers by 7 somehow. No idea how that happened. Then they get Wisconsin, which was that was last year was a down year for Wisconsin. They beat them 38-12. They go to Nebraska. They only beat Nebraska by 3. That's
Yeah.
terrifying.
They should have lost that game, actually.
I remember. Yeah, I remember
I
them.
know that's hard to believe that
They
Nebraska
should have
lost a
lost
close
that
one.
game. Again, that's another Nebraska regression candidate. Northwestern, they beat Northwestern 33-7. Again, Northwestern was horrible last year. Michigan State, the best team they'd played so far, they lost that game 37-33. Indiana had a down year. They beat them 29-7. Penn State, a down year. They only beat them by 4. Maryland, which at that point had sucked because Maryland always starts strong and they get horrible. Maryland, they beat Maryland 59-18, and then they beat Ohio State 42-27 in the game. We've talked so much about that game specifically. Then Iowa, they beat them 42-3. Wow, that was worse than I remember that game being. And then the national champ, then in the semifinal, they lose to Georgia 34-11. So like a lot, like how many times did I just go through? Oh well, that was a lucky spot because that team was having a bad year, and then oh well, then they escaped this bad team, right? This year you get Colorado State, you get Hawaii. Wow, that's even worse somehow. Then you get Maryland again. Okay, Iowa, Indiana, Penn State, Michigan State, Rutgers, Nebraska, Illinois. Wow, how did they get this? Is insane schedule. Okay, obviously you got maybe the 9.5 isn't even that. Well, they'll find a way to lose something
Yeah,
because
I
like
wouldn't I wouldn't I wouldn't consider like I know, they just played them for the conference title, but I think at Iowa was a different dynamic than conference title against Iowa.
yeah, that makes sense. But like UConn, how'd they get? Who let them get UConn? That's not fair.
Uh,
Hawaii, they
That's
have
just a
Hawaii
great
at
job
home.
by their athletic department. That's what that is.
This is amazing. This is like the most skill I've ever seen in schedule building. They don't play anybody until Maryland, which is the end of September. They have Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. Then you have Iowa. Then you have Indiana. Then you avoid Wisconsin. You avoid Minnesota. You avoid Purdue. Wow, that's really lucky. And so okay,
Yeah.
maybe not the under 9.5, because like for
Well,
who
that's
who's
why I
gonna beat
wouldn't.
them?
Yeah, well, it's Ohio State definitely, and then you just have to group the next group of like possibilities. At Iowa's not a gimme. The other thing too is if you look at Iowa after those 4 cupcakes, that could be a complete punch in the face. Your first road game is always tough, and especially after you've played those 4 guys and you think like you're really good,
Mm,
that could test the confidence versus false pride. Um, Penn State almost beat them last year. Now they get them in, at Ann Arbor, but
hmm
and they get Michigan State at Ann Arbor, which helps too. And they get Nebraska at home too. The schedule really lines up in their favor. But Nebraska almost beat them. I mean, Nebraska almost beat everybody, but it just Michigan State did beat them. Penn State almost beat them. That's why I didn't have it on my will play, just because that schedule, like I said, does help them. But I kind of look at it this way. Can I see them just as a two-loss team? It's hard. I mean, they they're starting over on offense or on defense. Their quarterbacks, maybe in the top half of the conference. They lose both coordinators. They lose a really good defensive line coach. They lose, two elite defensive ends. There's going to be a surprising loss on their schedule, and the
Well,
fact that we can't really pick it out makes it even more so that's bound to happen.
yeah, well, that's the thing, right? Like, okay, so Ohio State beats them. That's so 12 game season, right? So that's so that for the under 9.5, you need three losses, right? So Ohio State's one. Let's say Michigan State, but that's pretty iffy. That's probably even. They might actually be. They'll probably be. Michigan State would probably be an underdog going into Ann Arbor. But then what? Penn State? Like, I don't want to rely on Penn State to beat them. That's. But then, so what are you hoping? Like this Michigan team this year is going to be like, oh, Iowa is like 21.5 point underdogs at home against Michigan. Wow, like that's the spot. That's when you bet that. Then you bet that play. You're like Iowa plus 21.5, or I don't know if Rutgers is doing anything, or Nebraska somehow hasn't fired Scott Frost yet. Then you play Nebraska there or something. That's I don't know. That seems high, but that schedule is easy. But again, this is the problem. This is the ceiling for this team. Again, it's that final boss battle at the end of the season, and I don't see them getting through it. I don't like this team could be undefeated. Like Ohio State, Michigan could be undefeated, but again, as we just said, the spread there is Iowa State minus 13.5. So like they know something. They clearly know something we don't know, and that is that this Michigan State team is probably very fraudulent. Speaking
Yeah.
of, oh,
Sorry, just one
go
more
ahead.
point on that. You kind of point out something that's interesting. The three non-conference games are gimmies. So basically, they're saying that their conference total is 6.5. If you look at it that way, they're basically looking at 6.5 and 2.5
Mhm.
in conference. If you've got 9 Big Ten games, so I that just makes me think that that Big Ten schedule is a little tougher than we're probably just giving it credit for right now.
Fair. Yeah. Well, I'll think about that more. But anyways, now next up is we talk about the final boss battle of the Big Ten East, Ohio State. Let's talk about Ohio State. So we've talked a bit about them before. Obviously, their defense last year was bad, specifically their rushing defense, right? We talked about how Oregon was able to run all over them. That's how Oregon beat them in the regular season. Michigan was able to run all over them again. That's why they were able to beat them then. And then again, that defense just had a ton of problems there in that Rose Bowl against Utah. And now, obviously, they keep C.J. Stroud. They did lose Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, but they keep Smith Najigba. He was a really good player for them last year. He can make a huge step up this year as an amazing wide receiver. If this team can figure it out defensively, which again it is Ohio State, at some point there is a next man up. Maybe they weren't there last year, but eventually there will be a next man up there. If they can get some people on defense and 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 as if they can get some people back on defense, like this team could compete, and we can see them in the national championship game, and it's going to be like Ohio State Georgia or Ohio State Alabama, or like we're going to see this team play a really good. We're going to see this team play an SEC team. I think is in the conference in the championship game is what I think we're going to see. What do you think about that? Like, do you see this team making a step up on defense, or is this team just going to be offense? Because that was offensively last year. This team just put up like so many points. Like the Ohio State over points was free a lot of weeks, but the problem is the fact that a lot of the times their defense would just let them down, and like it'd be like cool they score a bunch of points, but then they're also letting in a bunch of points. How do you see this team this year?
Yeah, I think the defense makes a big step forward. Their defense was sixth in the Big Ten, which is probably not as bad as we think. Although probably their defense had a lot of help from their offense, which might mask just some of the problems they had because Ohio State was so good on offense that their defense, was in a better spot than a lot of defenses were. Their defensive coordinator for the last 2 years was let go. He just wasn't working out. I actually remember in 2020, I got into it with somebody about. I said their defense is not good, and I got some pushback, but it wasn't surprising that they didn't really get better in 2021. So they bring in Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State, who had nationally the third best defense at Oklahoma State, which is a lot. Not something that you're going to see every day is Oklahoma State having the third best defense in the country. And I think they got him from Wake Forest too. So this wasn't like just some kind of unknown thing. When they hired him, it was a good hire. And it was just a matter of time before he was going to go to a place like Ohio State. I actually think that Knowles is probably the best defensive coordinator today, either him or Phil Parker at Iowa or Jim Leonard at Whiskey or Morgan Scalley at Utah, but he's in that elite group now that Brent Venables is no longer a DC. Um, on offense, I mean, so I think the defense just needs to be good enough. I think because their offense is so good that we could kind of see, a little bit geared down version of LSU 2019. I actually had their offense as the best by 7 points last year over the second best offense. And just to give you some context for that, 7 points is the difference I had between the Alabama offense and the Florida offense last year. So that's how much they were better than the second best offense in the country. Stroud I have him as the top returning drop back quarterback. There's the kids at Air Force and Coastal Carolina and those weird option offenses that really skew QB plus numbers. They do lose their top wide receivers, as you mentioned, and I've heard some people say, well, Smith and Jigba, what's he going to do when he's got to do it all by himself? And we saw it in the Rose Bowl. He set a record. He has the most receiving yards in the Rose Bowl by over 100 yards. So, and that was a good Utah defense that he played. So that answers that question. I just don't see any Big Ten offense coming close to them. Their defense can just be okay, and I don't think they're gonna lose until the post. I can't see them even being tested really until the postseason. I've said that Notre Dame has some questions, but one of them is not their defense. Their defense is going to be really good, and the fact that Ohio State's favored by 14 over them tells me a lot. Um, that just that speaks to what a runaway they're going to be in almost every game this season. I don't see them giving any less in any game in 22. You actually said that Michigan, they're giving 13, I think, or 13 and a half.
13 and a half, yeah.
Yeah, I'd jump on that because I think that's going to be closer to 20 by the time that they kick that game. I don't know how, my book actually had them at 440 last night to win the college football playoff title. And I've seen prices are closer to 300. So I actually grabbed some of that last night as I was doing this research.
Yeah, that's a really good price. My book has them a lot lower. I'm like the 300, I think 300, 350. Yeah, I don't know. This Notre Dame one is a little weird. I could see like it's going to be a fascinating game. I could definitely see Notre Dame like covering or maybe even potentially winning, but it's a like it's going to be a real test of this Ohio State team, right? Can this Ohio State team can they actually close out against pretty good Notre Dame defense, right? That Notre Dame defense put up a ton of points there against Oklahoma State, and then apparently just didn't show up for the second half. Maybe they just like, okay, cool. We know we're playing Ohio State next. Let's rest the starters now, get them on that 6 month break early. No, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what happened in that game. I kind of I like Notre Dame. We'll have to see. Like, I mean, obviously you're paying a Notre Dame price. Like, if it was a team that was like similar to Notre Dame that lost to Oklahoma State, that's probably closer to 20. But I don't know. I haven't decided yet what I want to do on that game. We got a lot of time before that game. That line's not going to move very much, I don't think. So we'll have to. I'm unsure, but I can see this team winning. Like, here's the thing: even if Ohio State loses to Notre Dame, they could definitely still win the Big Ten, and they could still go to college like easily. That's not even a question. If Notre Dame is their only loss, like again, you have to start kind of penciling in what the college football playoff would be, right? Like, is it going to be like Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Notre Dame? No, like that's a really potential. That's a very strong potential playoff, right? If USC drops a game somewhere, or they lose to Utah, or Utah loses a game, or like that's a real potential playoff, right? So, wow, that would That playoff would really piss off people who didn't want the 12-team playoff. They're like, what is this? They're like two SEC teams, Notre Dame and Ohio State.
Yeah.
That's yeah,
This
that would really piss off some people. That'd be kind of funny though. Um,
if you look at their schedule too, I mean, we came to a consensus that we had the top two teams in the West being Minnesota and Purdue. And I think we both agree that although we like to joke about Scott Frost, they're probably going to be a pretty good Big Ten team in the Big Ten West team. And Ohio State, unless I'm missing some, looks like they dodge all three of those.
yeah, they do. That's pretty crazy. They do dodge Purdue. They do dodge Minnesota. That's pretty lucky. But they do have Notre Dame though, so that's a thing. But that's doable. That right? You can survive that. That's not a
Yeah,
huge deal, right? So, um, yeah, but that is good. I mean, you get Northwestern, you get Penn State. Obviously, you do get Wisconsin though, but we don't really put much. Like Wisconsin will probably lose that game, so that's fine. Yeah, Notre. That's I'm really excited for that game. That's 7:30 ABC. That game's going to be really good. I'm pretty excited for Notre Dame, Ohio State. All right, Penn State. Here we go. So Sean Clifford, who was a quarterback. No, I mean this is yeah, I don't like this team at all. I mean, I've already placed a. Oh no, I haven't. I have not placed this bet yet because the line is still moving a little bit. But I've been eyeing Purdue plus 3.5 and money line against Penn State. Um, I really like that line. I I like I don't trust this Penn State team. This is one of my favorite teams to fade. This is a big name that generally doesn't do much. They're not ranked right now. They're not in the top 25. They did get a lot of votes. And again, I mentioned that when we talked about the coaches poll. We're like, how many people I asked, like, it's interesting that they weren't ranked there. How many people ranked them? And then that wasn't enough to get them in. Same thing happened here. About half the people think that they are a top 25 team, but it's interesting that half the people do not think they're a top 25 team. And that is also telling in that case because that means that like we talked about the ranges for Miami, right? Like they range anywhere from 25 to 10, right? That's a huge range. Assuming these other teams, when you start getting into like the 20s and the 25s, they all have that kind of range. Like, do half the people think Penn State is like the 20th best team in the country, and like, do half like obviously they don't rank past 25, but do the other half of them think Penn State's the 40th best team in the country, right?
hmm
Like, where is that distribution? And obviously, it wasn't enough to get them ranked. I don't trust this team. I honestly think that Franklin could be like a surprise firing. To be honest, like I like that's what I think could happen this year. Because like I know how like when you're at an elite school and you don't perform, and Penn State is definitely in that category, that's when your jobs it doesn't it, like and he just signed people like he just signed a, no it does not matter. They will fire you because they have the money. They don't care, right? Like they will get rid of you. The Big Ten's about to get a massive media rights deal. They don't care how much it's like. They don't care if it's going to cost more to get rid of you. They will get rid of you because winning is the only thing here. That's the only thing that matters for Penn State. And if Sean Clifford and James Franklin aren't able to do it, and their recruiting rankings haven't been particularly great the last couple of years, like I'd be concerned if I was them. So do you agree with me on this Penn State team, or are you bullish on Penn State?
I'm definitely not bullish. I might just be in a different economic kind of stratosphere than you if you think that they can afford to buy out James Franklin. That's a big, big contract that he just signed. So, tip of the hat to you if that's just chump change to you. I'm not there yet. I'll get there. So yeah, I just don't see it happening. And it's I like James Franklin. I think what he did at Vandy shows that he can coach. He had some success there a few times at Penn State as well. It just how he wound up, with how you wind up with Sean Clifford as a quarterback for one season should not happen. How that happens for like, 4 seasons now as a starter is just something's gone really, really wrong. Um, so in his last 2 seasons, in his second and third years as a starter, his QB plus was 89 and 96. What's interesting is keep this in your back pocket. Before that, in his first season, he actually had a really good QB plus of like 120 or something. And I bring that up because then his offensive coordinator was Joe Moorhead. That was before Moorhead went to Oregon. So just something to like look out for to steer off for 30 seconds here. just look for Akron if there's any kind of like of a pulse on offense. It could be interesting because he makes a difference. So, anyways, back to our regularly scheduled thrashing at Penn State here. Offense, no good. No reason to expect any improvement. They were below FBS average for all of FBS on offense. Yeah, I just it's they're going to be in a bad spot game after game after game after game. Um, I think their defense is going to be good. But you're losing Brett Pry. You're bringing in Manny Diaz, who's a good defensive coordinator. But I want to see if there's going to be a seamless transition or not there. What's really crazy to think when they played Iowa last season, they were number 4 in the country, and I think Iowa was number 2 actually. Um, and I think Iowa actually that was a game where Iowa maybe took 3 knees before the game was over, and they had to punt after taking 3 knees to to get the 4th down. Just a weird game. Um, what's I have a hard time seeing is the what's that place? The Ramparts Casino on the west side of Vegas over in Summerlin. And yes, I will probably drive there for some of these bets. Um, they have the conference wins on Penn State at 6.5. That seems really high. It's that's the best bet that I've not scheduled to play. It just has a lower ROI than everything else. But if some numbers change once I'm there and I get the live numbers, I could see the under 6.5 sliding onto my grid there.
Yeah, so actually, I actually looked that up. The Penn State Iowa game. It was Penn State was 4, Iowa was 3, which is insane. By the way, like that, that is that's peak Penn State being 5-0. Like who they played at that point? Let's see. Let's call it that schedule. So they had beaten
They beat
Wisconsin
Wisconsin, yeah.
16-10. They beat Ball State 44-13, which is that's fine. They beat Auburn by 8, but Auburn was not great that year. Then they beat Villanova, who apparently has a football team. Then they beat Indiana, and then they beat Iowa. Then they lost to Iowa 23. But then the next week oh my god, remember the next week
Yeah.
Illinois, they were like
How
19
could we
point favorites.
forget?
Yeah, 19-point favorites, 20-18, which that was 9 overtimes. Oh my, I remember that game. That game was insane. Uh and I remember they were like 19-point favorites against them too. That was God. That's why you love college football. But yeah, no, that in that game, Sean Clifford threw 2 interceptions, and there was some.
What?
Yeah, he against Iowa, he threw 2 interceptions, and then they brought in someone else who somehow threw 20. Taquan Robinson threw 21 passes, and he also threw 2 interceptions against Iowa. Just horrible all around. I don't even know. That stat line is horrific. The other
They
guy,
got
the
a
other guy, the backup, I guess he threw. How did he throw 21 passes? Was Sean Clifford injured? I don't know. He went 7 for 21, which is one of the worst stat lines I've ever seen. But no, like yeah, this Iowa team is like this Penn State team is like watch out. Like they'll usually start strong, but then they'll fade. But this year could be like they get Purdue, they get Ohio, which was one of the better MAC teams. They get Auburn. That'll be a pick. I don't know. I have no idea who's gonna win that game. Um,
well, that's just
Cent-
a bad quarterback bowl right there.
yeah, Central Michigan, Northwestern, Michigan. Then you get
And
Michigan, you
yeah,
get Minnesota. So they don't get lucky.
woof.
They get Purdue and Minnesota, Ohio State,
In Ohio
Indiana,
State.
Maryland, Rutgers, and Michigan State. They luckily they dodged Wisconsin, so that's somewhat okay. But not a fun schedule. Definitely not a fun schedule, I would
Just
say.
right in a row at Michigan and then hosting Minnesota and Ohio State. I don't like the chance. I was just I don't think it can be any worse than Minnesota being like your kind of sandwich game where you're between like two big name opponents. That's just got disaster written all over it.
Well, is that if they go 0-3 in there, that's the conference total under, right?
Yeah, right there
That's it, yeah. And then that's
before
still
November.
excluding that they could lose to Purdue and that they could also lose to Michigan State in the last week of the season. Like
Yeah,
that's if they go 0-3 there, then that's it, you're done. And then if they lose to Purdue week 1, then you're already at then you're already done for then you already have they only need to go lose 2 of 3
yeah.
or 1 of 3 and then yeah, so yeah, I mean again, the point you make is crazy, right? In the NIL era where Penn State is a big name, how is it that Sean Clifford is their quarterback for 4 years and is he going to be their quarterback next year? God, like But this is the problem, and I think a lot of teams are starting to realize this because in the NFL we had this for so long, right? Where it was like there was the rush to get a quarterback, right? And you see teams tanking for a quarterback, right? You go back to tank for luck, and like all these in the NFL, you always saw these teams tanking for a good first round quarterback, and basically they tank an entire year just to get the first overall pick or like a top 10 pick or something to get a good quarterback. Well, in college football, there is no draft, right? That's not how this works. You have to sign the kid off the street. Well, before you could sign the kid up by saying like, "Hey, guess what? We've got this awesome weight room." Now you're like, "We've got this awesome weight room. Also, here's a check for $1 million." That's how you get the kids now, and I think it's going to be an adjustment for a lot of these teams. And the thing of it is, a lot of these coaches, because in I think the way this kind of ends up is that like a lot of these guys maybe they're good coaches, but they're bad recruiters. And I think you need to start having there needs to be a bigger role. Like you almost need like someone who's a recruiter who he's just the full time recruiter for the team, and then he just goes out and talks to these kids, and that's it, right? Like you need the coach to be the coach, and you need the recruiter to just go out and sell to these kids, and they can deal with all the stuff that you're not supposed to talk about in terms of how the money's getting to the kid. But this is the thing. It's a new world, and I think Penn State is a team that can adjust to it, but they just haven't yet. And they're gonna have to figure out how to get a quarterback really fast. And if they don't, then we're gonna see a lot more seasons like this where it's like over like where basically they start the season unranked. If they can't start getting quarterbacks, that's the Penn State of the future.
Yep, agree.
Moving on, Michigan State. So this was actually a surprise team last year. They were ranked really low to start the season. I don't think they were definitely not even ranked.
Yeah.
Um, they were a surprise team last year with their new head coach. Um, and then they went basically undefeated until they lost to that Purdue team that we're talking about, and then they lost to Ohio State. They got blown out by Ohio State because they just could not defend the pass at all. But then they beat Penn State, and then they beat Pittsburgh in the Peach Bowl. But they did beat Michigan. I love that game. That I had they were like 4.5 point dogs at home against Michigan, and they did a lot of good things. Like, and the thing is, the season started with Northwestern. I think Northwestern was actually favored against them week one. Actually, I can call that up right here. I think
Uh, Northwestern was getting a field goal.
nope. Week one, yeah. Northwestern on ESPN says Northwestern -3 when they played last year. Northwestern was actually
Oh,
the
you're
favorite
right.
against,
Sorry. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Yep.
which is insane. Like when you look back at the totality of the season now, you're just like
Yeah.
sometimes you look back at some of these lines and you're like, what was this line? Like this was not even remotely close to realistic at the time. But yeah, and this they only beat Indiana by 5 though, which that one was a little bit surprising. But again, it was a look ahead to Michigan. So my concern is though that like this team took such a big step up this last year. I worry a bit about regression this year because Michigan State was a good team for a while. They kind of fell off. They got a new coach. They've sprung back up. But the thing is, there's still more room to grow. I feel like last year was kind of, and we kind of talked about this, right? Everything fell right for Michigan to be able to win the Big Ten, right? I kind of feel like at the same time everything felt right for Michigan State to be competitive as well. Like this year you have Ohio State, you have Wisconsin, you have Michigan. Wisconsin's not that scary. You do have Penn State, that's not that bad. You get a bunch of MAC teams somehow, but you do avoid Purdue, but you do have to play Minnesota. Like I worry about this team. I worry that maybe like that's it's not a fun basically part here to go Ohio State, Wisconsin, Michigan. That's not a fun trip at all. Not in October. I worry maybe that like although we are penciling, it's like oh Michigan State will win this game, they'll win this game, and they'll win this game. I do worry that maybe we're just a little too high on this team. That is a concern I have though. What do you think about it? Do you think I could be I could be kind of right that maybe we are viewing this team a little too high? Like this is a team that I'm high on right now. I'm not gonna put anything on it right now, but like I feel like during the season my model is gonna tell me to fade the team, and then I'll fade the team at times, and that's where I'll be. But I do worry that we are a little too high on this team right now.
Yeah, I agree. They were like 15th, I think, in the or 14th around there.
Yeah, 15th in the
Yeah.
in the AP.
I'd be very surprised if they were that high at season end. I think they're gonna be closer to 25 than that. And by closer to 25, out of the poll. is you know possible. The thing is, I actually had them in my metrics fourth overall in the East. I actually had them behind Penn State, who we just kind of sentenced to the gallows of 2022. So, what happened was I showed them with three games of good luck last season, which is incredibly high. K Ford shows 2 wins regression versus this year. So 2 data points saying that there was just a lot of luck in what we saw last year. Um, their offense should be about the same. Their quarterback is pretty good. Peyton Thorne, he's in that kind of next group after the big guy in Ohio State. Their offense was good. Their defense is where I am really kind of wondering what are we going to see here. They were not good. They should actually be among the most improved in FBS based on the improvement metrics. They had a lot of guys getting their first taste of ball last season, but they were 11th in the conference on defense. So they've got a long way to go just to be even okay on defense. So, and what really concerns me here is, I think it was the last podcast I made that impassioned case on behalf of Cade Womack at South Alabama because he's a defensive guy with defensive credentials. And the first year he improved their defense, by a yard of play, which is insane. But it makes sense. And you think this program, I see the trajectory. And Mel Tucker was a very good defensive coordinator. And what he's done is actually improve this program on offense. And it just makes me wonder, can we really expect, the trajectory to be sustained when they had luck and, whatever they did well was on offense, which is really not on the coach's side. Now, good on him for bringing in an offensive coordinator who clearly knows what he's doing. But I just, not only do I not see them coming close to what they did last season, I can actually see them just going completely down the elevator shaft this year. Like we could just be saying, you know, God, Michigan State went 5-7. How are they ranked in the preseason, let alone 15th? And kind of to, a little kind of initial point that really supports my thesis here is Washington was so bad last season, and they made a great hire in getting DeBoer, but Michigan State went 10-2, in the regular season, and they're giving less than a touchdown to Washington State or a Washington team that was just an absolute embarrassment. I mean, if you kind of just did blind resume, just one loss, you would just think you just average fan like my late dad when he was still watching football, he would just say Michigan State by 10. Just there's a lot here where it's less than that, and it's kind of like your canary in the coal mine about not as good as people might think here in at Michigan State.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing. It's probably not a bad idea to fade Michigan State. That being said, they're playing Western Michigan first week and then Akron. So, a little hard to find. And sometimes you can't even bet a money line on that, right? You can maybe bet a spread or two. But it's might not be fun. The thing though is that like Peyton Thorne was their quarterback. He was not bad, but at the same time though, it's undeniable that basically Kenneth Walker made this team work. Like
Yeah.
this team was completely based around getting him the ball either through rushing or sometimes he was even thrown to him too. He basically kept this team going, and a lot of times he carried it on his back. That's completely gone now. Now I don't know how you can basically just replace one of the best players in college football who's a running back. You can't really do that a lot. Now there's obviously good running backs you can get the same kind of production from, but I don't think you can just get that same kind of like there's good running backs and there's amazing running backs. Now, generally, if you're talking about in terms of like value and expected value, especially in the NFL level where everybody's good, like the amazing running backs, they're not like that much better than just the good running backs. But at the college level, an amazing running back is actually still very valuable.
Hmm.
So, because like they could carry a team on their back, they can run through a bad defense because that's a lot of bad defenses in college football, and that's the thing. It's hard to replace that. Now, again, I don't know. I don't think we're gonna go like this team probably makes a bowl. I don't know what bowl. They probably make a bowl. I just don't know what bowl that is though. So I don't know. Well, I'm intrigued to see how this is going to end with this team. I don't know if I'm gonna. This is probably a team I'm going to end up betting. Like the mall is probably going to tell me to bet against them on the spread on some weeks, and I'll end up doing that. Um, Maryland. So we're now kind of at the tail end of the Big Ten here. Maryland. So this is an interesting team. They always seem to start pretty hot on the year. Um, they still have the other Tua. Um, and they're going to start hot again this year. They've got Buffalo, Charlotte, SMU. Then they got Michigan. So good luck there. Then they got Michigan State, Purdue, Indiana, Northwestern, Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State, and then Rutgers. So this team will start like 3-0, and then they'll be like, then they'll get like, yeah. But see, the problem is we're gonna coax ourselves into betting them against Michigan, though. That's the problem, right? You know that's what's gonna happen, right? We're gonna be like, oh well, they can cover the 14.5 against Michigan, and then Michigan will blow them out, and they'll be like, ah, see, Michigan's a good team, right? So this is the fear, right? So I don't know. This team has been both good and bad at times. I don't trust their coach though. But I don't know. This team could be good for a win every once in a while, and maybe there's a couple value spots you can play them. What do you think about this team this year?
Yeah, I actually would keep my eye on the week after they're at Michigan. They host Michigan State. Um, we made some pretty good arguments against Michigan State, maybe not even being ranked. To your point, they probably make a bowl, but what kind of bowl? And that's Michigan State's first conference road game of the season. And at some point I'll have the stats, but I'm just a big believer in that first conference road game is that can really be a sucker punch game as much as anything else. So I'm definitely going to watch that one. Um, Boy, they got just a tough road. They're at Michigan, then hosting Michigan State, and then Purdue. That's not really fun. The thing that really surprised me is, depending on when you watched Maryland, and apparently I got them at their great camera angles. I thought they were a really fun team to watch on offense. And then when I was looking them up, I had them as an offensive rating of only 2.4, which is barely above average in all of FBS. So I kind of wondered what the heck's going on here because they look so much fun. So their yards per passing attempt in their five best games, their yards per passing attempt was 9.37 yards, which would put them fourth nationally between Alabama and Ohio State last year. And then in their other games, they threw for 4.9 yards per attempt, which would be 11 worst nationally between Arizona and Georgia Southern. So clearly they were a Jekyll and Hyde offense last year. Now, I don't think that that's a limiting factor necessarily because if I look since Mike Locksley got there, their QB plus in the 3 years prior to this, 59 and then 93 and then 115. So they're making improvements. That leads me to believe that there's probably still some room for growth here. I think it's pretty easy to buy the narrative that if they just, keep this improvement going and just find better efforts versus some of their opponents, they can kind of just take another step forward. This kind of looks to what looks to be like, I call Loxley's build a two season when you're taking over and you're kind of putting your roster together and getting your guys in spots, and then you get a good quarterback like Tungalayovoa. You can kind of see when the pieces are kind of assembled to go around and have that one ascending season, and it looks like this might be kind of that near term high point for Maryland. So I can see that. Now the problem is their defense has stunk from day one since he got there. It hasn't improved. It's not like they had a bunch of young guys last year, so I think the defense is still going to stink. They just are going to need to be better at outscoring people. Um, you know, like I said, I think the best candidate for a breakthrough win is week 5 versus Michigan State. Now that might be one of those games that's, a win over a top 10 team at the time, and at the end of the season Michigan State's unranked. I think towards the end of the season they have a chance at Wisconsin at November 5th. You and I talked about Wisconsin doesn't figure to be as good this year. And then we've really made strong cases against Penn State. So Maryland, I think, actually would have a. I think they would actually have an interesting chance at Penn State. In mid-November. I'm curious what you would make that game because Sean Clifford is such a wild card. Um, this could be anything. I could see Maryland winning that by 2 touchdowns or just getting boat raced. I think they lost to Penn State by like just some huge number a few years ago. Yeah, 59-0. Um, what would you make that game? It's at Penn State.
My model isn't tuned for that yet. I'd have to assume you'd go um Penn State minus 6.5.
I
That
was gonna say, yeah, it's
that's what
Penn.
I'd set it at, but I like again, I don't know. Like Maryland will have gone 3-0, and then they could be either like, well, if they beat Michigan, and then they beat Michigan State, then okay, they'll lose. They like pencil in the loss to Purdue, but then they could beat Wisconsin, so they could be like, was it the ninth game? They could be what, 1-8? No, sorry, eight. They could be 8-1. But then the problem is next week's Ohio State, so that's a look ahead game too. So that's why you do minus 6.5, and then you bet Penn State because it's a look ahead game for the Ohio State game for them. But like this is another team that like a classic, like they beat all the teams they should, but then the second they step up in competition, they just get crushed.
Mhm.
Like and you see this with last year, right? So I'm just looking at their schedule from last year, right? Week 1, beat West Virginia 30-24. Beat Howard, again, a D2 team, 62-0. At Illinois, beat them by 3. Okay? Guess they're looking at the next week against Kent State, 37-16 win. Then they play Iowa, lose 51-14. It was Iowa. But again, and to your point, right? Because ESPN here shows the passing yards. Tagovailoa only threw for 157 yards in that game. In a whole game, how do you like? He threw for 384 again. I mean, obviously it's Kent State, but like he threw for over 300 in four of the 3 of the other 4. Ohio State 66-17 loss. Minnesota lost 34-16. Indiana beat Indiana by 3. Penn State lose 31-14. Michigan State lose 40-21. Michigan lose 59-18. Rutgers win 40-16. And then somehow they made a bowl because they were 6-6. Virginia Tech just crushed them 54-10. So it's this is a team that like it's so weird in terms of expectations management, and I like I like this team could be like you talk about that Penn State game. This could be anywhere from Penn State minus 6.5 to it could be like it could be Maryland minus 6.5, Penn State minus 6.5, could be Penn State minus 20.5, right? It could be any one of those numbers, and I don't know if I don't know where that game's going to land. We're going to have to like that game's going to be completely dependent on where we go in the season, in terms of where we end up with. Um, Next up, so 2 more teams left in the Big Ten. Indiana, obviously, and yeah, this was a team that, yeah, they had that amazing COVID season with Michael Penix, and then he got injured last year and he's gone now. But yeah, that was there's like a magical season for them where they covered. I think they almost beat Ohio State in that COVID season, and it's just nothing. They haven't returned to that at all. Like they were horrendous last year, and like it really questions as like, okay, was that a fluke? Like was that just a complete fluke? Now this year they have Cincinnati, uh, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. They do avoid Minnesota and they get no, they get Purdue last week, but this was not a kind season to them. Their only wins were against Idaho, which is D2, and Western Kentucky, which they beat by 2 points. So yeah, not an inspiring season. Again, 24-0 loss against Penn State, 20-15 loss against Michigan, 54-7 against Ohio State, 38 they lost Maryland by 3, lost to Michigan 29-7, lost against Rutgers 38-3, lost against Minnesota 35-14, lost against Purdue 44-7. Like these are horrendous. Like it's not like they were close in all these. Like they weren't losing these by like a touchdown or maybe even 2 touchdowns. Like these are brutal scores in a lot of these games against teams that they were competitive with just like at this point just 12 months ago. Do you think we've seen that? like have we, and again, a lot of this was with Michael Penix at the helm, right? He played that Western Kentucky game. He played against Cincinnati. He played against Iowa. He played against Penn State to some degree. Got injured in that game. Then the wheels fell off even more. What, like, do you think this, like, is Indiana done now? Is this a team that we liked before and now we're never going to see them be competitive again?
Yeah, I think that what happened was they had a really good run of coordinators. They had Kalen DeBoer as their offensive coordinator, who then was hired away at Fresno State and did a great job there. Now he's at Washington. So clearly they had somebody who was very, very well suited for the offensive coordinator job there for Idaho or Indiana. And their defensive coordinator, I made a very, very strong case for him, Cade Womack, who's now the head coach at South Alabama, and just instantly improved their defense. So I think they just kind of really just with their coordinators and Michael Penix just kind of struck lightning in a bottle, which is kind of the kind of program that Indiana is. That was a while ago, and it seems a lot longer since they've had, that magical season. Seems a lot longer than 21 months ago when that season ended. Seems like a lifetime ago, especially if you're in Bloomington, I'm guessing. I just don't see them really making any progress at all. I like the coach Tom Allen, but um, it's tough. I actually am going to be interested to see, because I'm just sick this way. Illinois against Indiana could have like secretly good intrigue where Illinois probably has a little bit of rational confidence and Indiana might have some um, rational anxiety. And so who wins that? I don't know. That could be especially on a Friday. Sure, I'll watch that.
To be fair, not a lot of games on. Well, actually, there are a couple of games on that day. What's the spread in that game? I will. Oh, Indiana -5. That's the famous. We have no idea what's going to happen
Wow,
in this
yeah.
game spread. Oh, but God, though, like I don't want to. You can't take Illinois +5. That's
Tom
insane.
Tommy DeVito.
That is just play Russian roulette right there. Like again, Illinois could either win this game or lose this game by 20. That's what that this is how this game works,
Yeah.
right? They either win this game or lose it by 20, and I don't know which is. I think they're both equally likely. Um,
That's actually why this is a good game to watch because we talked about this before. Like I think it was Duke and Temple. We were saying, what on earth is that line going to be? And because there's such a wide dispersion of what it could be, I think it's going to be very instructive to actually watch the game.
yeah,
Where it's not like, well, of course it's so and so by. I mean, Ohio State by Notre Dame, 14 over Notre Dame. That was almost preordained, and I don't think that number is going to move. This could move a field goal by kick, and I think and it you could have just a wide variance in the final score versus the spread. This is the kind of game I like because of that too, because there's just two huge unknowns. Now, Tommy DeVito is going to be at quarterback for one of the teams, so I will probably have to have the vodka very nearby for all of this game, but why not? It's a good Friday for me.
yeah. That is a Friday that is rapidly approaching. That's September 2nd. That is only we're recording this on the 15th. That is only just over 2 weeks away. 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and in 2 weeks we will be on the Monday to that Friday. So very, very close now, just a little bit over functional, like 2.5 weeks away. Again, we are so close here. Rutgers. Here we go. The team that we both believe is the most likely to be first relegated in the Big Ten. Um, there's no relegation yet, but they'll be the first ones. No, I mean, this team is so frustrating because sometimes you're like, you see a ridiculous spread like Rutgers +30, and you're like, come on. Like it's 30. These are semi-professional players. Like, come on. And then sure enough, but then sometimes they cut. Like sometimes the spread will be 30, and then they'll win a game, or like they'll lose by like 7 or something, right? And it's a team like they played Temple. They beat them 61-14. That's pretty crazy. Beat Syracuse. Beat Delaware. They only lost to Michigan by 7. Then they got crushed by Ohio State. They lost by 20 to Michigan State, lost by 2 scores to Northwestern, which actually seems a little too. That was probably a lot closer. What was the spread? I actually want to know what the spread in that game was. Then
Rutgers was actually favored by 2 in that game.
yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds like a thing that would happen. And then Illinois, they beat Illinois by, so they lose by 2 scores to Northwestern, then they beat Illinois. Then they got absolutely stomped by Wisconsin. That was probably 30 points. That's 52-3. What was the spread in that game? Wisconsin minus 13. So that was
13,
actually
yeah.
there's some value on that Wisconsin spread. Then Indiana, obviously, then they beat Indiana 38-3. Then they lose to Penn State 28-0, lose to Maryland 40-16, and then somehow they make a bowl because someone dropped out, and then they just get crushed by Wake Forest by 28 points. So, God, there's a lot of teams that are like we talk even in the Big Ten. There's teams like Rutgers, Illinois, um, Indiana, Rutgers, Illinois, Syracuse, and that actually I think is an ACC team. But there's a lot of teams that like are basically the same team. That they're like bottom of like they're bottom. You're gonna get crazy spreads on them plus like multiple scores, and they either get completely blown out or they like either lose by 7 or win the game. And yeah, I don't know. Where do you see this team going anywhere, or do you think this team is just permanently kind of locked in the basement of the Big Ten?
I don't think it's permanent. I think Shiano is an underappreciated coach. You know, the 2 seasons before he came back, they won 3 games, and they've already won 8, including a COVID-shortened season. Um, but man, just like we talked about with, when I was talking about Dana Dimmel at UTEP now, if you don't get a quarterback, you're in bad shape, and he just hasn't had anything resembling a quarterback so far too, which kinda makes it remarkable that they've actually had, 8 wins over 2 seasons. Um, Somehow they have in the middle of a rebuild, they have one of the least experienced offensive lines, which I would kinda think in year 3 it would be not the case, but maybe I kind of vaguely remember him taking a lot of transfers in his first season, so maybe that's just kind of, made this really just a tear it down to the studs on the offensive line season. Um, there's just it's weird that, on defense too, they just, they have like just kind of average returning talent in terms of experience and actually below average in terms of improvement metrics. So I, you know, I've kind of made jokes about, crummy teams I like to watch. I don't think this is going to be one of them. Their quarterback play is just so bad that I'm just not gonna rearrange my Saturdays to watch Rutgers.
I don't think many people will be rearranging their Saturdays to watch Rutgers. They usually play early in the day though, to be fair. So you're only well
Yeah,
for you specifically because you're Pacific time. You're only rearranging your Saturday mornings, like early
true.
Saturday. This is like breakfast. You're like, all right, it's breakfast time and Rutgers. Let's do this. Nah, like I'm not gonna watch the Big Ten noon. I'm gonna watch the Rutgers game. Um, but no, I mean, yeah, it's a spot team you pick up at random spots and you're like maybe I'll bet them this week and this time or not. I don't know. They'll win some games, but I don't know. They don't have a particularly great schedule. They have yeah. They seem to have avoided they don't play Purdue, but they play Minnesota, Ohio. They have Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Maryland, Iowa, jeez.
Yeah, they get
And
Iowa too.
Nebraska. So they could literally so they play Boston College week 1. We're actually a little high on Boston College. Then they play Wagner. Then they play Temple.
Oh man, there's a treat.
Then that's the first 3 weeks. So what? They could be what 1-2. Then they play Iowa, Ohio State, Nebraska, Indiana, Minnesota, Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Maryland. They could go O and X, OX for that. Like they
Oh
could lose every
yeah,
single one of those games.
it's the Indiana games. They're you know
That's the game. That's the get to 2 wins game.
yeah.
What's their win total?
Let me see
I'm
here.
gonna find this now. What
Four
do
and a
you think
half.
their win total is? Huh?
4.5, but the under is juiced to minus 130. So
That's insanely high for who's the third win? What's the third win on like so what? Give them Indiana, give them Wagner, give them what? Temple, Boston College. So then what? So that's what the over is. It's basically saying win what beat one of one good team.
well, it's 4.5. So you got to beat two to get the over.
So okay, so let's give them the other. So let's say they beat Boston College, Wagner, Temple,
Um,
and and Indiana, which we don't think they will, but say they do. So then
yeah,
what? It's beat one good team, and one of these eight good teams, and or Nebraska.
yeah, yeah. Um,
That's kind of a nice under, actually.
yeah. The only thing is, I don't know that this is weird that hosting Nebraska's on a Friday night. That's got
Ooh,
weird things written all over it.
that does. That is not a. That's not a fun. I mean, there's probably no spread in that game yet. Um,
It's yeah, they host Nebraska too, which is just really weird.
yeah. God, that will be a. God,
Yeah,
I
that
just on thing it shows Nebraska's last five. It's just horrendous. It's because I'm just looking. See, there's a spread. There's obviously no spread, but it's like Nebraska's 0-5 in the last five against Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio State, Purdue, and Minnesota, and four of those games were by a score.
so yeah, it's that game just I'm gonna be obsessed with that game because in basketball, Arizona's great coach Lute Olson would say whenever his team would go to Los Angeles, he would say it was so much harder to play at USC because it was deadly silent in there, and he couldn't get his players up. And we go to UCLA, and it would be packed, and everybody he'd say, "Nobody believe me this. It was so much harder to play at USC just because I couldn't get my players up." And I just see that just Nebraska at Rutgers on a Friday night. Um, that just has flat road team written all over it.
That is not a small journey. That's getting some air miles for them.
It's just
They're getting
weird, yeah.
they better use their air miles card for that one. I mean that's across. No, it's still just one time zone, I
Yeah,
think. This,
but they're
but
at
it's
the edge of the
close. It's
Central.
edges of, yeah.
Yeah,
That's a far trip. That's a what, 4 hour plane ride at least. You're
probably, yeah.
you're gonna get on a plane for 4 hours. You're just to New Jersey. Sleep in New Jersey. Wow. All right. I think this is one of their wins. I think we're gonna be betting Nebraska Rutgers in this game in October 7th. So 1 month from now, I'm gonna mark it in my
Yeah.
phone. I'm gonna remember. I'm definitely gonna remember this game. This game is like when we see this when we see the spread for this game, it's gonna be like, oh, I remember this game because it's so painfully obvious. But yeah, no, this is a game that we're gonna have. But what do you think the spread in this game is gonna be? So Nebraska at
Um,
Rutgers. What do you think the spread is?
I would say Nebraska probably like minus 16 and a half.
Oh, easy. The Rutgers spread. Rutgers money line. Let's go. Not
I
even
think the
questioning.
big prediction here is October 10th, even if Nebraska wins, I think October 10th might be the official Scott Frost not going to make it this year. That
Yeah,
might be the moment, just like an ugly win even if they win.
they're like, all right, we're all gonna get back on the plane to Nebraska. You,
Uh-huh.
Scott Frost, you take the Amtrak's. But yeah, no, yeah, this could be an ugly game, and this Rutgers team is gonna be pissed, right? Because they're gonna have played. This is sandwiched between Ohio State and Nebraska and Indiana for them. So this is like what they're gonna be like. This is one of our only chances to win a game. Yeah, and again, 16 and a half. What a weird games don't end on 16 very often. It's going to be a weird spread game of like a Nebraska at least by a couple scores. Yeah, that's going to be I'm excited for this game now. This is going to be good. This is I know, this is how degenerate we are. They were excited for this game. Oh, this is okay, so they played Oklahoma. They'll play Oklahoma, then Indiana, then Rutgers. Then at Rutgers, they play Purdue the next week. So okay, yeah, this could be interesting. It's not the greatest spot, but it's not a bad spot either. It's gonna be yeah, that's all right. I'm excited for this game now. We've now got everybody hyped for a Nebraska Rutgers game on October 7th, a Friday night game. So, anyways, I think that's enough for this week. We'll be back next week. We're gonna finish off our previews. We're gonna finish off. Obviously, we have not talked about the Pac-12 yet, or the Pac-10, depends on how you prefer to call it. Um, Obviously, we're gonna have the Mountain West, and then we're gonna start talking about Week 1 and spreads and picks and stuff, and then we're in the regular season. So until then, watch NFL preseason. It's not the worst thing ever, and yeah. Also, for people who are people who are listening, keep an eye out. The NFL model is very close to being finished for this year, and that'll also be the college football model at some point. But we're very close on that. It's going to be out pretty soon. Just need to upgrade the graphics. People who have seen the account know that we tweet out the Call of Duty League projections. We're trying to upgrade the graphics. If people were with us last year, they saw they saw the NFL graphics that were horrible last year. We're definitely upgrading those. We're at that point now where we're very close to upgrading them. The graphics this year are gonna have a lot more information, so stay tuned for that. That's gonna be really fun. I'm really excited for how that's gonna go this year. So yeah, keep an eye out. You're gonna see something on that in just a couple of weeks, and yeah, the version 2 of the NFL model is gonna blow your minds. So yeah, be excited for that. Anyways, we will see you guys next week.